Warren G. Harding was the 29th President of the United States and the 6th to die while in office. Harding had won his 1920 election in a historic landslide, 60% of the popular vote. He was mourned by millions on his death. School children collected pennies to help pay for a memorial tomb dedicated to him. But the circumstances of his death were less than straightforward. And by 1930, the country was convinced there was a conspiracy afoot. A conspiracy wrapped in a scandal.
And you know it's serious because Paula's doing her mystery podcast voice.
It's a mystery. Or is it? Is it perfectly reasonable and logical? Listen to find out. And welcome to Remember, a podcast about history, mystery, and did you know that too many laxatives is bad for your heart? Now, that is not a history fact, but it is a science fact. And it is something I learned while researching this very episode.
Wait, did you learn it while researching it or during researching it? Because those are different things, Paula.
While researching.
Gotcha.
And a man who loves to keep things moving. A guy always on the go, a squire who squirms at this brand of loose comedy is my co-host, Matthew Jude.
I absolutely hated that. Thank you.
I thought you would. My name is Paula, and I think actually that I owe everyone an apology for the laxative intro, especially Matthew, who I knew would hate it.
I'm out. I'm out this show. I'm done.
Warren G. Harding was a guy people liked, and he liked people. And he liked putting people he liked into important government positions, whether or not they were technically qualified for those positions. Now, in some cases, it really worked out. And in some cases, it really bit him in the butt.
Well, I think that was the duck he made Secretary of Defense.
Yeah, he really quacked things up.
It was fantastic. I'm still enjoying it, Paula. Allow me a moment.
Dear listener, if you could see his face, you would know he's not. He never was enjoying it. But let's begin by starting at the end. Harding's end. President Harding was just over halfway through his first term in office. So he's like 3-ish years in. And it was decided he should go on a voyage of understanding. That's what they called it. He left Washington, D.C., June 20th, 1923. And traveled across the country to the west, making stops along the way to give speeches and begin drumming up re-election support. He was the first sitting U.S. president to visit both Alaska and Canada.
Tough getting votes in Canada, though, right?
Tough. And Alaska at this point wasn't a state either, so...
That's a hard sell as well, yeah.
He gave a speech in Vancouver, and there is a monument to him in Stanley Park in Vancouver, which I'm pretty sure I've seen, and always was like, why is that? Now I know.
My favourite monument to a president is the massive statue of Bill Clinton that's in Pristina in Kosovo.
Oh.
And in Clinton's defence, while not a perfect man, he really did a lot to... I mean, obviously, we could get into politics of this, but the whole Balkan crisis really was Clinton's finest moments, I think, eventually.
While on this voyage of understanding, Harding began to complain of not feeling well.
Was he doing ayahuasca? I'm doing a voyage of discovery. Where are you going? I'm off to go meet a shaman.
I'm just going out into the garden, the rose garden here at the White House. I'm just going to do some shrooms, see what visions I get.
I'm going to go to Alaska to see if I can get any of those mushrooms that the reindeer eat.
He said that his stomach hurt. He was short of breath. He was having painful cramps, and he was just exhausted. When they arrived in San Francisco on July 29th, it was decided that Harding really needed just a few days of rest. He had never really fully recovered from having the flu back in January, after all, and this packed trip was wearing him down. He checked into the Palace Hotel to take it easy, and doctors diagnosed him with pneumonia, on top of the heart problems that he had suffered for years. They gave him some heart medication and caffeine. And on August 2nd, he was feeling a bit better. That evening, he was in bed while his wife, Florence, read him an article from the Saturday Evening Post, an article that was saying nice things about him. Harding said, "That's good. Go on. Read some more." And then he died.
Well, that's a shame.
Yeah.
How old was he when he died? Do you know?
He was 57.
That's pretty young for someone so powerful to be dying.
Well,
I mean, not if you're like an ancient king of Greece or something, but, in modern times.
Harding's death was a huge shock. He was only 57, though the average life expectancy for a man at this time was 54, because it's early 20s. But also some of that was probably influenced by, I'm just now thinking, I bet a lot of that was influenced by World War I.
Yeah. The average life expectancy of a working class man is going to drag the life expectancy down of everyone. I mean, hard labourer, depression, starvation. I mean, that's to come, I suppose. But miners, drillers, farmers, any number of the Spanish flu. I mean, that was at that time. So
yeah. Though right now, the depression is to come. We see this country sees an economic boom post World War I. Which is why we had the Roaring 20s. Everyone was like, we got money to burn and life is short.
True.
The nation mourned their beloved president at first. But soon, Harding's reputation had tarnished, and rumors of foul play surrounded his death.
It's the Secretary of Defense again, that duck. Foul play. You're welcome. It's all come back around.
Yeah, it's as good as my "you really quacked it up" joke. It's actually better because it's more of an appropriate pun.
It is better. Let's be real about that. I want that on the record.
Noted. Recorded. The first conspiracy I'll tell you about came from the book The Strange Death of President Harding by Gaston Means. Gaston, who was born in Concord, North Carolina, which is meaningful to me. Concord, because that is right outside of Charlotte where I grew up, and it's where my favorite band, the Ava Brothers, are from. It's where NASCAR happens. We got the Lowe's Motor Speedway, if it's even still named that, who knows? Concord Mills, the big mall. Neither of those things were there at this time.
I'm more of an Opry Mills kind of guy.
There's a Mills in all kinds of places that's there, yeah.
Although it did flood that one time. Anyone remember that? Nashvillians? They had this thing where it was water from all the different rivers around the world, and it would run through the shopping mall, and it's like water from this mall, and then the whole place flooded.
What?
During a storm. So it's like, I guess the water from the Amazon's gone now.
Gaston is a wild and fascinating and unscrupulous man who I am 100% doing a follow-up episode on, because he got up to some shenanigans, which I discovered literally while writing this paragraph. I was like, I'm sorry, he did what now?
Is it Gaston?
It's Gaston, like Gaston.
It's Gaston. His name's Gaston, right?
But it's America, so we say it Gaston. It's Southern. His name is Gaston Means, but it's spelled like Gaston from Beauty and the Beast.
If your name's Gaston, call yourself Gaston. That's cool.
Well, for now, we are going to talk about Gaston in the very specific context of President Harding's death. Gaston Means worked as an investigator, and when his boss became head of the new Government Bureau of Investigation, later renamed to the FBI, he became an investigator as part of the Bureau, and this gave him insider knowledge on the federal government. Or so he claimed. He also claimed that this meant he got to know the First Lady, Florence Harding. Florence hired him to do some PI work on her husband, the president, Warren G. And that's because Florence thought her husband was cheating on her, and she wanted proof.
This sounds unlikely.
You don't think Gaston sounds like a reliable source for anything at this point?
This sounds just unlikely to have been the truth.
Well, soon after Harding's death, it was revealed to the public that he had been cheating on Florence. He was actually a prolific affair haver. We don't need to go into too much detail about these affairs because
No, let's do them. Let's go into the dirty details.
one had been going on for years before Harding was president.
These couples don't love each other, Paula. They're relationships of convenience and power. Do you think that Clinton it wasn't a surprise to Hillary?
No, the Clintons, I do not believe the Clintons love each other. But this might have been different. I don't know. But this is basically so they had like a couple friend, like, oh, we do things with this other couple. We travel with them and we like hang out with them and whatever. Well, and the dude is his best friend and the woman is Florence's best friend. But Warren and the wife of the other couple had been having an affair for years.
You dirty dog.
And
power is sexy, though.
Yeah. But this was happened before he was even president. But yeah.
But why do you think all those pro wrestlers get so much action?
Because they have power.
The sheer power.
So when Harding was up for election, the Republican National Committee actually paid this woman and her husband to travel to Europe during the election to just keep them out of the way. Because they didn't want anything coming up to ruin their chances of getting Harding elected. But Florence already knew about that affair. She'd known about it for years and years and years. So that's not what she was having Gaston Means investigate. She didn't know about Nan Britton, who was significantly younger than Warren. I think was like 17 when they met. She was significantly younger and underage when they first met. And she would meet up with him at the White House to bang it out in an office closet. So hot. I think this is an example of being attracted to power, 100%. Like, I don't know, I guess, and some people thought he was handsome. He's not a bad-looking guy. He's not who I'm not attracted to him, but I could see some people being attracted to him.
He's not the worst-looking president, though, is he?
Oh, absolutely not. No, he's pretty good-looking when you think about all the other presidents. The public would eventually find out about this when this is after Harding's death. Nan published a tell-all called The President's Daughter because, Warren knocked her up.
He was doing a presidential tradition, like Jefferson before him.
Just, have some mistresses, get them pregnant. It's totally fine. This first conspiracy that Gaston Means wrote about in his book is that Florence poisoned her husband.
It does. I was going to say poison because this does sound like poisoning.
He was sick. And she did this out of revenge for his affairs. I mean, Harding did complain he'd gotten food poisoning from some bad crab in Alaska. Maybe it was actually wife poisoning.
Paula's doing a very expectant face. It could have been, yes.
I thought there was going to be more of a reaction from you.
Who's to say? Probably you. It's the first conspiracy, though, out of a list of, I'm assuming, multiple conspiracies. So my guess is it's not this one.
Well, Gaston Means didn't think Florence poisoned the president because of revenge. People were saying that's what happened, but he was like, no. Here's the actual reason she did it. According to his book, she confessed to him that she did it to protect Warren. She knew that scandals were about to break. She didn't want him to suffer that. He quotes her in his book saying, quote, "In every way and at all times, in trying to protect my husband, I ran into a solid wall of opposition. Warren Harding died in honor. Had he lived 24 hours longer, he might have been impeached. I have not betrayed my country or the party that my husband loved so much. They are saved. I have no regrets. I have fulfilled my destiny." That's what Florence supposedly said to him.
That doesn't make any sense. That makes the opposite of sense.
Yeah.
That's nonsense. That doesn't. It's just. I'm literally trying to get to grips with how little sense that makes.
That she would be like, well, his reputation was about to be ruined, so he better die.
I've done him a service by killing him rather than let him live in shame. She's done her duty to the country.
Well, let's move forward in time a little bit and let's think about JFK, whose legacy is remembered as so great, just cut down early. But who knows what kind of mess he could have gotten into if he had lived. You know what I'm saying?
We should just all kill ourselves then.
We should all die as soon as we've done something good so we don't have a chance to keep living and mess it up.
Also, I'm a firm believer, and I think it's common knowledge now that members of the CIA have said that they were involved in JFK's death. It's one of those kind of things. It definitely.
That sounds like an episode you should do because I don't know any of these conspiracies.
I believe it's Nixon who is on record as saying, he was like recorded saying he don't let them do to me what the CIA did to JFK. That could be erroneous, but
he was kind of paranoid to begin with. But anyway, who knows? That's a whole different episode to talk about, which would be really interesting, actually.
I'm throwing it out there. I like Nixon.
I think there's some pretty unlikable things that he did. So I think if we dove into them more, you might change your mind.
I'm pro-Nixon.
So this is probably the time to mention that Gaston Means didn't publish this book until after Florence herself had died. So she couldn't corroborate that she'd actually said any of this, or deny that she'd actually said any of this. Also, his ghostwriter, Mae Dixon Thacker, later said that she thought Means made up the whole dang thing.
I mean, he obviously did.
Pretty sure he did. But if Florence really had nothing to do with the death, Matthew, why didn't she allow an autopsy to be performed? And why was she caught burning some of the president's documents?
Calvin Coolidge paid her to do it.
Some people thought, no. Florence didn't poison the president. The president poisoned himself.
Oh, yeah, that makes lots of more sense.
They claimed suicide, motivated by Harding knowing that scandals about him and the people he appointed to government agencies were about to break. He couldn't bear to live through that.
Now, that doesn't sound like a completely unreasonable idea, right? A huge scandal is about to break about you. You can't take the shame. You're going to off yourself.
Yeah.
That does make sense. But it doesn't line up, to me, with what I know of politicians. To me, that personality trait does not live within the political class. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, how can we spin this out? How can we get over this? How can we fail forward, Paula? Fail forward. What would John Maxwell say? Let's fail forward on this. You know, I feel like, I know this is the 20s. It's a different political landscape. I get that. It's in many ways, a refined, dignified. We remember it. We consider it to be more of a dignified type of landscape. But to me, it doesn't track. It's just everything I know of politicians is that shame is not necessarily something that burdens them.
And lots of people agreed with you, Matthew. He wouldn't have poisoned himself. His doctors poisoned him. The doctors who attended to Harding in his last few days apparently got blamed for a lot of things. The public couldn't understand how a man who appeared to them to be outwardly very healthy could just die. The doctors must have been incredibly incompetent, or, even worse, purposely poisoned him slowly, like what happened to that little girl in The Sixth Sense.
It's just like that, isn't it? Bruce Willis broke her neck.
No.
Is that not what happened in The Sixth Sense? I've not seen it, I'll be honest.
And then there are the really crazy theories, like the one where the Pope arranges for Harding to be assassinated. Though in some versions it wasn't the Pope, it was the KKK.
Some similar stances, I suppose, but quite different organizations when you really get down to brass tacks on that.
Why did people believe
Let's not just gloss over this, Paula. Why did people think the Pope did it?
I have no idea. This is just like, and then some people said it was the Pope. Some people said it was, I know why some people would think it was the KKK, because Harding was pretty vocal about his support for civil rights. But yeah, I have no idea why anyone would think the Pope had something to do with it, other than some people just get crazy ideas in their heads.
If the KKK couldn't kill bloody Martin Luther King Jr., that was the CIA as well.
I do believe that one.
You know?
So why did people believe any of these theories at all? Because, some of these are wild.
Well, because people don't like to believe that someone powerful can just die.
Could just die, sure.
One thing in history that I feel people don't like, historians don't like, history enthusiasts like me and you don't enjoy is when something just random happens for no reason.
Yeah.
There has to be a reason. Something has to happen, you know? And that is not always the case. In fact, often someone just dies.
Yeah, most of the time, it's kind of boring. You know, like it's not this exciting story.
It's just someone stubbed their toe and got sepsis. Someone had malaria. I mean, when you look at Alexander the Great, all those battles, all those years, all that work, and he essentially died of illness after drinking himself to death. We don't really know, but there's a mystery behind it. We want there to be a conspiracy. We want it to be this general did it, and this person did it, and it was Ptolemy did it, and we don't like that. We don't like. It's like that's never the answer in a film.
It's because it's
or in
not
a book,
interesting.
because it's not satisfying. It's not satisfying.
It also didn't help in this situation that, like, Florence did say, no, you're not allowed to do an autopsy, which is incredibly unusual, especially for a president dying.
It could have been a religious belief.
She said no to that, and then she did burn those papers. And we don't know why she did either of those things. And it makes people suspicious, right? Even though, like, it's exactly like you said, it could have been for any reason.
I don't like to rule out the idea of a conspiracy. I love a great conspiracy, a political conspiracy, a historical conspiracy. Oh, that's the best thing in the whole world.
Yeah,
But
it's because it's interesting.
sometimes the most obvious reason is the reason, right? And
Well, one reason she didn't allow an autopsy could go back to protecting the family doctor. Charles Sawyer was the preferred physician of the Hardings and had been for years and years. But he was a homeopathic doctor, and he didn't have the same training as other medical professionals. Maybe he was accidentally responsible for Harding's death, and Florence didn't want him to take the blame. So remember how I started the episode talking about laxatives?
how could I forget?
There was a reason for it. This is the part where I was researching and discovered. So Sawyer prescribed a lot of strong purgatives, which are laxatives, as treatment for Harding. And turns out that's real bad for your heart. And Harding had suffered from a dicky ticker, as I have heard Matthew refer to it, for years. But even properly trained doctors back then did not know as much about heart attacks and their symptoms as we do now. They all said that Harding died from a stroke, but it was likely actually cardiac arrest. They just couldn't diagnose that then because they didn't know as much about it. So it's possible that Charles Sawyer caused Harding to have a heart attack by giving him all these laxatives because he didn't know what he was doing. And Florence didn't want him to be found out as possibly responsible.
And those papers that she was burning were medical files, prescriptions, or records of this is what you should. It's a personal note. Hey, just take these 3 times a day. You'll pull through. Could be stuff like that. Letters.
Or it's just stuff that she's like, oh, we don't need that. I don't need to keep this. And was just like, all right, I'm just going to get rid of stuff. Like, it could have been absolutely nothing.
Also, grief does really weird things to you. And sometimes you just need to fill the time. And you think, I'm going to do this job.
Yeah.
Because it's a job I can do. I'm going to burn some papers.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
That was, you acted really strangely. You started cleaning your car or cleaning out a cupboard in your house after this. It's like, yeah, anything to take my mind off the fact that my partner just died.
Yeah.
My husband just died. He's also the most important person in the world.
Yeah.
So, I'm trying to get through that, actually.
But Florence being a bit weird in the aftermath of her husband's death isn't enough to justify how susceptible the public was to all the weird rumors and theories about foul play, especially because they really loved President Harding when he was alive. So what caused this change? What caused this suspicion? It didn't help that their beloved president was suddenly revealed to be not what they thought he was. First, they found out about all of the affairs, which means he was keeping a lot of secrets. So what else could be secret and unexpected? Right? You're like, well, he was good at keeping these secrets. What else was a secret? Second, a bunch of government-related scandals broke. Some of our listeners might remember learning in school about the Teapot Dome scandal. And while prepping for this episode, I did flash back to my AP US History class junior year of high school. And I was like, oh yeah, I did learn about that. Briefly, Albert B. Fall was appointed by Harding as the Secretary of the Interior and was given authority over the naval oil reserves in California and Teapot Dome, Wyoming, hence the scandal's name. Rather than leasing rights to those oil fields through an open bidding process like he was supposed to, Fall took bribes from 2 oil tycoons to just lease the land to them. Then there was the scandal with the Justice Department where Harding appointees took bribes and payoffs from alcohol bootleggers to look the other way about their activities, because this is all happening during Prohibition. They even confiscated alcohol and then sold it to the bootleggers. Harding found out that one of his buddies, Jess Smith, was part of this and ordered him to be removed from Washington, and then Jess Smith committed suicide. And then there was the scandal with the Veterans Bureau, where Harding appointee Charles Forbes was supposed to be providing hospitals and medical supplies for World War I vets, and instead he took bribes in exchange for awarding hospital construction contracts and inflated the costs of the construction to be able to give himself kickbacks. And he sold medical supplies meant for veterans to a private company.
How is this different from politics today, Paul? I've not seen the point.
Now, Harding himself was not directly involved in any of these scandals, but he did appoint all the people who became known as the Ohio Gang.
His judge of character is up for debate at this point.
It is up for debate. And he did make some really good appointments, but a lot of them were bad like this. And it's like, maybe don't just give your friends jobs they aren't qualified for, right? Like, maybe don't do that.
I mean, it is a hugely difficult task, though. You've got to assign all these roles, and the buck stops with you. To trust anyone is very difficult. You've got to make this person the head of this, the head of this, the head of this. This person needs to be in charge of this, and I've got to trust all these people. And I'm the president. I haven't got the time to oversee. I'm a delegator. It's a huge responsibility, just in a sense of saving your own neck.
The worst bit of these scandals, I think, is when Harding found out about Forbes and his abuse of power at the Veterans Bureau. He ordered Forbes to resign, and then, rather than having him arrested or tried for his crimes, Harding allowed Forbes to leave the country so he couldn't be prosecuted. So a lot of people are like, oh, that's bad. It's like, it's your friend, so you're like, oh, I don't want to have to prosecute you, but you've done bad things, so you got to go and just get out of here. Go where we can't reach you. But like, it's like, oh. So he let Forbes escape any kind of retribution. So when all this came out, people were horrified, and Harding's reputation was permanently damaged. And if all this could be true, why not believe that foul play could be involved in the death of the president, right?
I mean, sure, A is true, B is true. Why not C through F?
But it probably wasn't.
I could believe that the doctor had accidentally...
I think, yeah, it's highly possible that Charles Sawyer gave him things that made everything worse, right? Like,
or that would have made a stronger man cardiovascularly. Someone with a heart that was a bit stronger would have been fine. Yeah. But not accounting for the extra burden on his heart that was already there.
Right.
You know, it's just mistakes happen. It's a big mistake when it's the president.
We know President Harding was under a lot of stress. We know he'd suffered from heart problems for years, and that he was a heavy smoker and drinker. And we know that all the symptoms he was complaining of in the days and weeks leading up to his death are signs of cardiac trouble. Harding probably didn't die of a stroke or poisoning. It was very likely a heart attack.
Just a heart attack.
Yeah. But that's not as fun as a conspiracy, like we said.
It's almost not fun at all.
It's almost not fun at all.
Unless you're Calvin Coolidge, in which case you just became president. Congratulations.
It was like 2 a.m, called up at his like parents' farmhouse, and he was like sworn in like by his dad by like lantern light in the middle of the night.
Coolidge did 2 terms as well, didn't he? I think he 23 to 29.
So he would have finished out Harding's term and
Finished
then...
out Harding's term and done another term. So he won his own term as in his own right as well. And one of the best names of all presidents.
Calvin Coolidge.
Honestly, it's a great name.
I like Zachary Taylor too.
It's only because he sounds like he's in Hanson.
Yes. That is 100% why he stands out to me.
Yes, it is. It definitely is why it stands out to you. It's the first name of 2 of the members of the band Hanson.
So yeah, no real conspiracy here, I don't think. But it was fun talking about what the conspiracy theories were and still are. We don't know what happened. We just know now with a modern lens looking back what was likely to happen. And you know what? Since last August was the 100th anniversary of Harding's heart attack, I feel like enough time has passed for me to be able to say his boring normal death was boring and not fun.
Well, what a note to end on.
So, 100 years from now, we could talk about how boring your death was. Well, hopefully more than 100 years from now. Hopefully like 150 years from now.
150, so I've got mid-80s. That's me done. You're counting me out?
I mean, that's probably average.
I'm going to be 144 years old.
That is... Yep, definitely. I will not be, so enjoy.
I don't need you.
Enjoy coming up with a podcast that you can host alone, I guess.
Welcome to Back in My Day. No one's listened to a podcast for 80 years.
They're like,
but, whatever.
Great grandpa, nobody does podcasts anymore.
Look, I'm doing that floss dance.
It's like the Charleston.
I've still got it. Thank you so much, Paula, for doing the research on this episode. I appreciate you a lot. I'm looking forward to our follow-up episode on the guy who killed the beast.
That's right. Well, he fell off the castle trying to kill the beast.
That's wrong twice. That's not how that film ends. But Gaston. Anyway, regardless, there's going to be a follow-up episode, and I appreciate you for it.
Yeah, it's going to be wild.
If you want to follow up on this episode, dear listener, firstly, I'll say thank you so much for being here and listening. We appreciate you just absolutely immensely. The way that you can follow up on this episode is by telling someone who you think might enjoy it about the show, if you indeed enjoyed it as well. That is the best and probably the only organic way to grow a podcast, and we rely on people to just say, hey, I like this show. You should give it a chance. And if you want to do something in the private darkness of your own room, whilst thinking about remember.
Oh boy.
You can leave us a review on your podcatcher of choice. 5-star review goes a long way. A review with just one positive word is also very just useful. That's just so useful to us. It really goes a long way to growing the show. And it just... People like to know that they're not going to... Getting into a podcast is so hard, Paula.
Yeah, they like to know that like other people vetted it already for them and have been like, yeah, this one is worth your time.
I know how much energy it takes me to get into another podcast.
Yeah.
It's a huge dedication. I don't know what that is, but those reviews go a long way to help us out. Until next time, everyone, have an absolutely wonderful week. Thank you, Paula, for being here.
Thank you, Matthew.
And we'll see you then.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
And don't you forget it.